Hello, and welcome to Season 5 of the Your Neurodiverse Relationship podcast. I'm Jodi Carlton, your host, and I'm a neurodiverse relationship expert. But like so many of you, I've been on my own journey of discovering and understanding neurodiversity, both in my personal life with my family members and even myself, and professionally as a therapist and now relationship coach to people around the world. I'm often asked, can neurodiverse partner relationships actually work? And the answer is absolutely they can. Just like any relationship, there are core variables that influence whether or not you'll thrive as a couple. Neurodiverse relationships are no different, but they have the added layer of being neurodiverse, where one or both partners is neurodivergent. So this season, I've got a lineup of couples and partners who are in neurodiverse relationships that are working. They get real personal with me about the challenges they have faced and how they've overcome those challenges in their relationships. Let's get started. Hi, everybody. I want to welcome Lauren and Luke Smallcombe, who I've recently connected with, and I'm so excited. And you guys are now administrators in my private Facebook group that I've had for several years. And I'm so glad that you're on board and on the team there. And I just want to tell the world more about who you are, because I think the work that you're doing is amazing. And you're a neurodiverse couple. So this season, we're talking about, neurodiverse relationships and can they work in marriages and domestic relationships. And so I'd love for you guys to share with everybody a little bit more about who you are, what you do professionally, and then let's talk about you, the two of you, as a neurodiverse couple. So who would like to jump right in and get us started?
I'll give them the easy clue of who is neurotypical in our relationship, because I will really jump in.
Who goes first? I see that in my working with my clients. I always say, tell me a little bit about why you're here. I don't care who goes first. And it's obvious real fast.
We've learned how to like a river kind of flow our communication together when we're doing interviews or presenting a workshop or something. But it's funny, we just have very different communication styles, as your audience can surely relate to. So we thought, oh, I'm just super extroverted. And we thought, oh, Luke's just super introverted. And now we have a bit more clarity on that. But yeah, we live in Thailand. We're expats in Thailand. We live in northern Thailand, surrounded by mountains and tropical weather and fresh mangoes. And it's wonderful. We've been here for 8 years. Here with our kids. Yeah, I can't believe it's almost been a decade. And we have our own worldwide trauma healing practice. Here locally, we have our offices that we're in now, and we also see people virtually. So we've been doing that work together for the last 3 years. But before that, I'll let Luke share his journey. I have been many things in the healing world. I was first a nurse as like a 20-year-old working in the emergency room, and then it went to becoming a doula. And I was like, maybe I'll be a midwife and deliver babies. But I decided to go more holistic and be able to see more people. So I went into nutritional therapy, and then I couldn't fix myself. I had a lot of chronic health problems, and I ended up coming across this brain retraining modality. It's a mind-body medicine modality, and I recovered from over 70 chronic symptoms through the power of neuroplasticity. So long story short, I entered into his field. His field was always the psychology, and mine was like, oh, I'm physical health and your mental health, and which one's harder to treat? They're both so hard. And I kind of gravitated to the field of mind-body medicine and coaching in this practice we're doing now, really focusing on folks who are recovering from different traumas and chronic stressors in their lives. So that's me.
So very early in my career, because I kind of morphed in the area of mental health, but very early in my career, my specialization was acquired and traumatic brain injury. So it was interesting because that kind of prepared me for the different brain, but from more of a trauma, like an actual brain that's been harmed from a physical event of some kind, whether internal or external.
Yeah.
So I know what neuroplasticity is, but a lot of our listeners may not. Lauren, so can you just explain to people what you mean by that?
I love that you stop people and have them explain terms. That's amazing. Neuroplasticity, in its simplest explanation, is just the brain's innate ability to adapt and change on a physiological level and on a functional level. And
Mhm.
so because the brain was made to be neuroplastic, it's one of those things that can be, it's why actually trauma impacts us so much. So neuroplasticity isn't only good, it also makes us vulnerable to the brain changing to protect us.
Mhm.
But in the same regard, it can also change to heal us. And there's just so much hope in that fact that it is malleable. It really is like a moldable organ.
Yeah.
And I think that is so important. And what you just said about it changing to heal us is so critical, because I know there's a lot out there, a lot of narratives out there that trauma changes the brain, and that is true. But it's not only changing in the negative direction, that it can also, we can change it back and heal and a lot of things. So I think I love that you shared that. So Luke, tell us a little bit more about your journey.
Yeah. So, mine was a little bit more of a consistent journey. I decided actually going a different direction, but towards the end of my undergrad, I decided I wanted to pursue counseling, psychology. So I took some prereqs and went to grad school and got my master's in clinical counseling. For the last 10 years, I've been practicing. I've done private practice and residential treatment for teenage boys. I've done volunteer NGO work as a counselor, and I've enjoyed it, learned a lot. But about 3 years ago, me and Lauren have always wanted to work with each other because modalities are so similar. But the more our modalities lined up, we're like, now's the time that we should start something. And yeah, and so we started our practice. I mean, I just love what we're creating and being able to help people this way. And my paradigm has shifted a lot since grad school because a lot of neuroscience trauma paradigms are like polyvagal theory or nervous system work. I didn't learn any of that in grad school. So over the last several years, learning that and it's like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. And I see it helping myself and start applying to myself. I'm like, wow. And that's how I do my work is I find I like kind of dig in and own it and get to know it. And like, okay, this is how I now can, like people say, you can only help somebody as far as the journey that you've taken yourself on. And I find that to be very true with a lot of the paradigms that I use is I can only take people as far as I have taken myself. And so these paradigms, whether it's internal feeling systems, polyvagal theory, neuroscience, all that, to help trauma, as I've integrated it into my own life, my own journey, I could take that to my clients and I just see that helping people so much. And it's just been such a joy to kind of, like Lauren was saying, having that hope of seeing, okay, that I've experienced trauma, they've experienced trauma, but that's not a like a sentencing of, okay, this is your trauma and you are going to be sentenced to this effect. Yes, you can't change it or get rid of it, but you don't have to live under that trauma. And more I've experienced that, it's helped our marriage, it's helped individually, and also the work that we do.
Yeah, and that's an important mindset there, that you're not permanently broken. You got scars, but
Right.
it's like when you break a bone, the bone's not permanently broken. You may still
Yeah.
have a scar or an ache in that joint or whatever, wherever. I think that's a really important mindset shift. And I'm right there with you on the training and the education. I was in grad school 25 years ago. There was nothing out there yet. I mean, Bessel van
Yeah.
der Kolk came out with so much of his trauma work since then, or at least it's become more well known since then.
Yeah.
And of course, neurodivergence wasn't even a term I ever heard in grad school. Autism was a chapter in a book in a class, and it was about little boys, and it had nothing. And then I grew up in the era of Rain Man being what autism was, and so
Yeah.
that paradigm shift is what's so critical. And those of us in
So
the
critical.
industry have, like you said, you've lived this. And the cohort that I have of colleagues that are working in this field, which we're a fairly small group around the world, because we're finding, well, I think there are more out there, but we're finding each other just like we found each other recently.
Yeah.
Everybody that I've talked to has really emphasized that those of us who are able to really help the others the most are the ones that have walked this walk, and that
Mhm.
we've lived it and understand it. So your practice is Flourish Therapy, and we'll definitely put that in the
Correct.
show notes. And you have groups, you have private coaching and counseling. Anything specific you want to highlight and let people know about before we move on to talking about the two of you?
Well, I think as Luke was talking, I was kind of laughing because the growth we've done interpersonally, understanding our neurotypes and understanding that we are a neurodiverse couple has allowed us to be able to work together. So we would never be able to have this practice and not kill each other. It was like 10 years back. 5? Could we have done it 5 years ago? Maybe. But 10 years, definitely not. Anything before that,
Right.
it would have been a disaster. So this idea of like growing personally to understand this whole paradigm better has equipped us. And then now we're offering more things for clients. And it's one of those things for Luke that his clients just kind of in grad school, they told him like, your niches will find you. They will find you, the specialties that you're going to do. And trauma healing has been our focus for many years, also because we have adoptees. So we got really deep into it. But then the neuro piece came in because most of Luke's clientele and some of mine are neurodivergent as well. So we are offering neurodivergent support groups virtually, but also couple support groups will be starting in a few months, and we're weaving that with trauma healing work. So that's kind of something we're excited to do more of in these next year or so.
Oh, that thing about they will find you. I have told this story, but it's been a while, and I'll make it brief, but I did not want to work in the field of autism. I did not. I had been raising a daughter who was autistic since she was 5. Didn't even really fully understand that their dad was autistic until after we divorced. But I was starting to really realize that. So I decided to when I did divorce, I didn't have a full practice at that time. I'd been a stay-at-home mom for a while, so I was kind of reinventing my whole career. I had been in practice for 15 years, did a lot of the traumatic and acquired brain injury. So I thought, I'll just go back to that, or, I was just trying to reinvent, or not reinvent, but kind of resurrect my practice.
Yeah.
And I had done a little bit of work in working with parents who had autistic children, because that was the walk I was walking. But I was like, I'm burned out. I don't want to do this anymore. And I just flat out said, no, I'm not going to do it. And then the emails that I don't even know how these people knew about me. I don't know where they came from. And because I didn't have this big online presence at the time, I not at all. And I just kept getting emails from people who needed help in their marriages. And that wasn't even something I'd ever done. And I'm like, I don't want to do it. I don't want to do it. I just was like, nope. And I turned some people down, and they're like, please. So I took on like 1 or 2, and I didn't even feel like, who am I to help them? My own marriage just ended, and then I started realizing, and I remember another person said to me, another colleague said, Jodi, if you don't help them, who will? And I was like, oh, okay. And then, like you said, if you, what was the Field of Dreams movie? If you build it, they will come. I wasn't even building it but once I did build it, they did. It's been a flood ever since. So I really get that.
Yeah. I mean, again, we kind of entered, the neurodivergent arena, similar way of our kids think there's some things going on. How can we help them? What's going on? Then I'm like, oh, that sounds like my childhood. Oh, that sounds like struggles that I used to have.
Mm-hmm.
And and that's been understanding myself, like Lauren was saying, then seeing that my clients were like, oh, you might want to think about this or look into this, or just helping them navigate. And it's been, it's an exciting new season of realizing, like, just understanding more and entering into this world of supporting more intentionally the neurodivergent community and couples, because because of our own journey. Like, if we knew that I was neurodivergent 20 years ago, first 15 years would have been a lot easier.
Yes. And I think it's a new season for the whole world, really, because we're on this precipice of really shifting that narrative, that paradigm shift of what is neurodivergence, and moving away from a disease model where we look at neurodiversity as a mental illness versus a neurotype and just a brain wiring. And I think that, another 10, 15 years from now, we're going to have a different, really different understanding of all of it. And I think so many people will have different I'm so hopeful for the next generation, for my children's generation and yours, because they're going into it with their eyes open now, whereas we didn't. And we didn't know what our different, we understood more about personality differences. Myers-Briggs was a big thing back when I was in undergrad and graduate school. So we kind of understood that, but we've got so much more understanding of what neurodiversity is. And this next generation is so much more self-aware and just able to have conversations about it. And I'm just so hopeful for them. Yeah. So let's talk about the two of you, because Lauren, you were saying that working together, having this awareness of how your brains are different. Not only are you making a marriage work, but you're working together in a business. And so many people question, I was just saying to you guys before we started recording, that so many people ask me, well, is it even possible for neurodiverse couples to make it? And my answer to that is always resounding, yes, of course it is. But there are ingredients that all couples have to make it in a marriage, that neurodiverse couples are no different in those regards. But then that understanding of our different brain types, and then what's important for a couple, for each partner to bring to it is really pivotal. And that's what this whole season, this whole podcast season's about. So you guys just jump in wherever you want in terms of that, what that journey's been like for you, and how that narrative has really changed things for you as a couple.
It's hard to know where to start, but I guess a big thing is me understanding more my capacity. I think that's a bit, that capacity and even social capacity. So just life capacity in general, but also social capacity. Early on in our marriage, I was working like 10-hour construction days in grad school, and I'd be coming home and very tired. And times where Lauren maybe would invite some people over, maybe on the weekend or at night, and I would just come home. I knew I had to show up, but I didn't feel like I had the capacity, but I didn't have language for it. I feel like I'm tired, but tired is not a good reason, so I had to show up. And then our friends would come over, and then they would leave, and Lauren's like, "Why are you so rude to our friends?" I'm like, "What do you mean?" She's like, "You didn't talk to them the whole time, or you just felt like you were just like zoned out and like act like you didn't care." And that was a tricky dynamic, because she didn't want to shame me. She didn't think I was a bad person, but I wasn't being socially appropriate. So, but I took that as there was something wrong with me. So throughout our marriage, I would just start masking better, and I would just try to engage more, talk more, pretend, or frustrated or angry when she invited people over when I wasn't prepared for it.
Mm-hmm.
Because I knew I couldn't be myself, and maybe I couldn't mask well. And so that's just a small picture snapshot of so many just misses of personality, of communicating.
It's making me think of the RSD cycle that we'd get trapped in.
Oh, yeah.
So Luke has had very strong RSD characteristics in the past: rejection sensitivity, dysphoria.
Which just means I would interpret her rejecting me. She does, quote unquote, reject me. I'd feel it more intensely. But when she wasn't rejecting me, I would interpret it as a rejection. And so like those areas where she's like, "Hey, why aren't you engaging with them?" She was just curious or just trying to bring some insight or awareness. I would take that as like an attack. But RSD was a big thing.
So what would happen is this cycle of me giving this feedback, either giving it well or giving it with like a shaming sense behind it. Luke's RSD would flare up. He would get defensive and then either pull away and shut down or attack me and make me the problem. And then what I would do, as we had this over-under functioning dynamic, I was like, oh, also he's avoidantly attached. I'm anxiously attached. So there's all these dynamics play, right? And so he would pull away, and then I'd be like, oh, I need to pursue him. So then I would come in strong with pursue and trying to make it better, trying to make it right. But he's, shutting down because his RSD is saying, like, I am not safe. I'm threatened. She's judging me. She doesn't get me. and I'm like attacking further, which makes him shut down further. So that cycle happened with so many different issues, including the one he shared, that
Yeah.
just he felt so stuck in that, Jodi. Like, can someone please bring the rescue boat and pull us out
Yeah.
of this horrible, caustic, I don't even know a good analogy, quicksand that we just kept getting stuck in every time. It took many years to bring the insight we needed to know what was happening. And now that cycle is
Yeah.
there.
And what's so crazy making for couples, for both partners in that dynamic, is that you have this awareness that your partner is not this toxic, abusive person, but the whole dynamic feels, and you're not yourself. It's like you look yourself and say, I know that my intentions, my heart, I know that that's all in a place that's not not somebody who's just, bad person. I don't usually use the word bad, but
Yeah.
you have this awareness about each other, but then it's like, but why? What is happening? And it feels like quicksand, like you said. And really, even just in that scenario that you described, Luke, about the weekends, it just
Yeah.
really goes back to one kind of small basic thing that both of you had no insight or awareness about how, Luke, how your brain just kind of goes offline at the end of the week, cognitively, emotionally, socially, that it has to have that recovery period. And
Yeah.
so, Lauren's like, hey, it's the weekend. Let's have friends over. It's socialize. That's what we do. And even though you were showing up, Luke, like you had that awareness of I need to be here, your brain was just offline. And there was nothing you could
So
do to
off.
necessarily bring it back online. And then to you, Lauren, that certainly looks like he's just being kind of rude and he checked out and disinterested in your friends. And of course it was confusing for you too, Lauren. What was that like
Yeah.
for you to be on that side of things, to see your husband behaving like this, like he's just could care less about these people that you're inviting over, but it not really aligning with who he is? What was that like for you?
Right. I think that's such a good point. You're saying, like, when you know your own nature and you know your partner's nature, their core heart and self,
Mhm.
and that you're seeing such a different, experience, it is very confusing for couples. And for me, I think because of the attachment wounding that we each individually had, it just Luke and I always say we should have never worked. Like, our specific combo is so, and we also believe, like you, that yeah, any couple that has the ingredients, any partnership that has the ingredients to make a partnership work can work, regardless of neurotype. But we just were so like oil and water in the sense of his needs and my needs are so different. Now that we have healed a lot of our attachment wounds and early trauma, we are way more compatible, honestly, but very different needs. In that situation, my anxious attachment was so triggered by seeing him not show up for me emotionally. So it's like, I don't know if the audience has ever heard of the still face experiment they did in, like, was it the 80s, Luke?
I'm not sure, but 80s or 90s, I think. Yeah.
So it's like they did this experiment in the attachment world that the baby is engaging with the mom and the mom is showing reciprocity and interest and delight in the baby. And then all of a sudden the mom goes completely no flat affect, like stonewall face. There's nothing happening. And the baby's sitting there getting like internally distraught and just agonizing over, I can't get this mom to respond to me. And the mom's supposed to not respond. I don't know how ethical of an experiment it was, but the mom doesn't respond and the baby just absolutely loses it. It's like that existential dread of, I'm alone and I don't have my attachment figure. So if you have an anxious attachment, or any of the insecure attachments really, but specifically with anxious, you learned somewhere along the way that I have to find a way to get them back. And so maybe it's that smiles real cute and that blows a bubble, or we learn as kids, I have to find a way to garner that attunement that I need. And so I just learned that. I was a golden child in my family system, so I learned that really well. And when I couldn't get his attunement as a partner back to me, it would create such a panic in my system. And instead of just saying, oh, he's just, I didn't have the words for it then, but maybe I could have been like, oh, he's just tired, or oh, he's just checked out. No big deal. It became this attachment wounding that it
Yeah.
didn't need to be, but that was what my system interpreted it as.
I wasn't familiar with that specific study, but I'm really glad that you shared that, because I'm definitely aware of that reciprocity piece in infancy. As you were talking about, I even think about not just babies, but toddlers. If a toddler falls off the sofa, the first thing it does is looks at a parent to see, am I supposed to cry? Am I okay?
Yeah.
And then kind of takes their feedback from a parent's reassurance, or, even, are you okay? I'm not. So, because there's so much gold here in what you're talking about. And, I have my analogy about the backpack, where you've got this virtual backpack that you have everything in it that makes you who you are at any given moment in time. And everything's in there. And so what you're talking about, those early childhood experiences really set the stage for how we attach, how we interact with other very important figures in our lives. And you said that you and Luke shouldn't have worked, but oh my gosh, don't we find each other? We were talking about neurodiverse clients or people finding us as providers, but as couples and even friendships, we find the yin to our yang. I mean, we find the people who are our opposite. It's like this way of righting the wrongs. And we go and find those people who have the opposites of what, we need. It's like we need to try to fix that in adulthood, but we're unaware of all of it. It's like all this stuff
Yeah.
that's going on behind the scenes in our brains. And so there's so many aha moments, I know, for me, when I look at, my choice and the people that my marriage, my friendships even, and you realize there's so much of that is rooted in the early childhood experiences. Hi, everybody. This is going to be part 2 of my conversation with Luke and Lauren Smallcombe. So if you missed part 1, be sure and go back and listen to that. We had such a great conversation that I had to break it into 2 episodes. So here's part 2. As you guys evolved in your marriage, I mean, it was rough going with not only neurodiversity that you weren't aware of, but there were attachment difficulties, some trauma histories there, probably trauma along the way that was reinforced by your relationship, or the way you both handled external things that happen, because life happens, I mean,
All the above.
yeah. So what would you like to share with people? What's coming to mind?
I didn't know I had ADHD until about 5 years ago. And so looking back, I was an ADHD burnout, shut down. And I wish we just had that language so that Lauren could tell me her attachment was being activated. And I could have language of, this is nothing personal. My brain is just overwhelmed and shutting down. And the overfunctioning that she had to do, and like you said, we find each other. I think we had an early marriage counselor that told me that she was the overfunctioner. They didn't use that language, but like the cat and mouse idea.
Mm-hmm.
Any conflict we had, she always resolved it. And so he gave me the advice that that's no longer her job. I need to pursue her. And that was really helpful. Even looking back at it now as being neurodivergent, I think I needed that concreteness of something for me to focus on, rather than there's a lot going on. I don't know what to fix, what to focus on. For him just to say, focus on this, I think really helped my ADHD brain. And so there's that combination of, I had to take a risk and learn new skills, but she also had a lot of compassion. A lot of times I would be like, hey, you're being a jerk and I'm really mad at you and we need to talk. And she said, okay, you're trying. let's talk. It wasn't that bad, but my RSD would be activated, my attachment would be activated, and I wouldn't come with this gentleness or with all my thoughts organized. And again, now I know that as neurodivergent, my thoughts are organized. I am a verbal processor. It takes me some time to get things out. But just that, I think one reason why we made it is we are really good friends. We've always been we've we were friends before we were dating, and we always had that, I guess, that understanding that we are good people and we love each other, even when we were triggered. My brain always didn't hold on to that, but we always could get around to it. I think something that's helped is communication. And again, this is probably where Lauren overfunctioned because I was not good at communicating. Even if I initiated it or tried and it was a disaster, she would always bring us back together. And now I understand it as part of it is avoidance, but also part of it is object permanence. Like if I went to work, I didn't worry about the fight that we just had last night.
You didn't think about me.
It was like out of sight, out of mind. Yep.
I had enough on my plate and my mind to focus on. And she's like, "Are we going to talk about this?" I'm like, "Talk about what?" She's like, "The fight that we had last night." Oh yeah.
Oh, I believe it.
Like every hour of that day, I'm over here in my anxious attachment, dying inside.
Oh gosh, anxious attachment. I can relate I definitely had that attachment style. I think I've actually healed that part of me. And of course you can have a different attachment style in different relationships, depending on the safety of those relationships. I've likened it to like a drug addiction. One of the things that I learned to recognize in myself when I was having attachment issues is if I felt like I was having a drug craving, that need to reattach. I've never had an actual substance addiction in myself, but it felt like what I imagine it's like this just absolute compulsion to try to get my drug, which is reconnecting and resolving the disconnect in some way. And then you've got that paired with an avoidant attachment of my nervous system is completely overwhelmed and activated because you're coming after me so hard and heavy. So I'm pulling away from you even more. And that's such a common dynamic in neurodiverse relationships, because you oftentimes have someone who has that avoidant mixed with someone who's got the anxious, which of course those two find each other anyway, whether it's neurodiverse or not. So over the course of time, the two of you had this, what we see in neurodiverse relationships, this growing chasm that was between two people who are friends, who genuinely care about each other, love each other, respect each other, have high regard for each other, but this gap is growing. What would you say was like the turning point? For some people, it's different. Some people it's slow. Some people it's like a moment in time. Can you identify it, or do you even know?
It was definitely slow. It was, very slow of really helping us heal our attachment together was a big thing. And it's interesting, like, I wish our language of neurodivergence came in earlier because it would have saved us so much, but that's only been in the last like 4 years. So there was a lot of stuff that had to happen before that of like attachment, but also there was some understanding of personality differences about 6 to 7 years ago. Just understand what we now would say are very neurodivergent characteristics, but Lauren saw these and was like, "Oh my gosh, I understand you." And in that context, I also could say, okay, I'm not broken. This is just a personality. Because there was so much shame of who I was, not just in our relationship, but just in general. But we also grew up in a high control religion. So there's just shame upon shame of I was broken, I was bad, I didn't fit. And then Lauren is this extroverted, high motivated, very efficient, productive person. And I am this lazy person is kind of how I said it. Like, I can't keep up with her because I work and I'm tired. She works and she can see people, she can interact, she wants to engage. And I'm just like, I must be lazy. So one day, maybe I can heal enough to be not lazy. And the personality showed that I have low energy. And Lauren's like, oh, this makes much sense. And I was like, oh, I'm not broken. I'm not lazy. I can just be low energy. And so that really helped just have some language.
You should share what it was, because some people might know about it.
Yeah, the Enneagram.
Yeah.
So I'm a 9 and she's an 8. So like from that perspective, she's high energy, I'm low energy. It's like and again, 8s and 9s, they shouldn't be in relationship with each other.
Well, unquote.
Quote, shouldn't, yeah.
But I would have challenged that, because my perspective on that is that it makes you more of a power couple, honestly. Because if you had two high energy people, I think it would. Can you imagine the chaos? But also, if you had two low energy people,
Yeah.
then there's also another kind of chaos, which is just total, just nothing gets done. Whereas two high energy people, too many things are, too
On the
many irons in
table.
the fire. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that having that balance actually is such a strength, where one of you slows things down a bit and the other one keeps things moving. So,
Yeah.
but it's learning to embrace those differences and being respectful of the other, without judgment. And that's, I
Mhm.
think, when things like these personality tests, Enneagram, Myers-Briggs, which is now, 16 personalities, there's a bunch of different ones online that you can look at. It really
Yeah.
takes some of that shame and judgment out of it. Like you were saying, Luke, when we look at it and go, oh, there's a lot of other people who are enough like me that there's a category that describes us, and it's not pathological. It's not an illness. It's not something wrong. It's
Yes.
just our operating system. I use that analogy all the time about neurodiversity, whereas we have operating systems and then we have different software
Yeah.
on our operating system, which makes our whole system function differently, and one is different from the next. And so it's like if you had
Yep.
two laptops, one might be really, really great at running these programs, and the other one might be really great at these programs, but would crash if it tried to run a program on that one. But we all contribute in such a positive way to society, and even in relationships. I want to back up too to something that we're talking in this podcast season about the ingredients that need to be there for couples to make it work.
Mm.
Not every neurodiverse couple is going to make it, but a lot will, even like you said, with such major differences. And one of the main ingredients that I'm seeing in the two of you is, at some point, even though you were in what I call the boxing ring for a while, where you kind of saw each other as the opponent, both of you
Mhm.
were willing to stop and do some introspecting and
Yeah.
looking at yourselves and going, okay, what is happening here? Can you describe a little bit for folks what that was like, especially when you're in a place of kind of feeling like you have to defend yourselves, or for you especially, Luke, like you're having to defend yourself, and then Lauren, not so much what I'm hearing is defending yourself, but more feeling like you have to go get that reassurance, like almost like pursuing Luke's love, and not knowing if it's there because he seems to be kind of shutting it down. What's that like, to be able to stop and look at yourselves?
I'm thinking, two of the biggest shifts for me were learning how to not overfunction and to have a balanced level of responsibility for my people, my kids, my partner. And that was, very connected to an anxious attachment style, because of the role that I had played in my family of origin. So it was like multiple things happened in our personal lives where kind of the Jenga tower came tumbling down.
Mm-hmm.
And I was faced with the reality that I cannot save anyone. I can only save me. And Mary Oliver has an amazing poem about that. Like, you are the one that you're here to save on this earth, no one else. And for me, I had to embrace that at such a deep level. And it was almost like dying, because that had become my identity so deeply, to help my people. And then maybe that is why I was drawn to someone so different than me, and to someone who was undiagnosed neurodivergent, didn't feel confident in the world, didn't feel capable or competent, even though he was, but he didn't feel it. And it was like, I came in like, oh, I will help you. I will give you that. And it really was that magnetic pull we had to each other, which I completely, like, that's our paradigm too, Jodi. We are constantly seeking to balance out these polarizations in the world, in our relationships, everywhere. And we do it through finding people really different. And it can be the worst disaster, or eventually like the most powerful transformation, right? And for us, I had to stop trying to fill in all the gaps and make everything okay. I also have 3 neurodivergent kids. So there was just a lot of overfunctioning that I was doing, and in our relationship, this dynamic we had gotten into. And thankfully, before I started pulling away from that, we developed a more secure attachment. So that really gave us more security and safety to feel like, okay, we can redefine our roles. this
Mhm.
over functioning bit we were stuck in. I reminded you about that thing. This is the last time I want to remind you about it. So can you make sure that you remember however you need to? Because I'm not going to bring it up again. In the past, that would have maybe pissed him off because it's like, wow, she's so, whatever, fill in the blank because of how that might have felt. But now he can see, oh, she's trying to not overfunction. She's trying to be
Mhm.
balanced and take care of herself and be a supportive partner, but not be an overly supportive partner. And because we developed more security, which how we did that, honestly, you had asked, was there a time? And there was, I think you didn't think of it when you asked that question. We were in a very traumatic situation with a kiddo, one of our adoptees, and it was years of trauma inside of our home. We just were in that situation, and it kind of made all the petty crap that we fought about go to the wayside.
Yeah.
And really depend on each other to help each other feel safe because we had such little safety. So we found solace in each other. And in that really difficult environment, we actually became so much more securely attached individually and to each other, which is weird, right? Like, who would have thought? But it's the perspective shift we needed to let go of stuff that really didn't matter and recognize what we had and how good it was, that we really did have this unconditional positive regard, like Gottman says, for one another, that we really did have care and consideration and have each other's backs. And we just were able to experience it more in the midst of those seasons. And it stuck, like,
Mhm.
continued on to just have so much more security in the context of our relationship. Super thankful for that.
Oh, there's so much there.
Yes.
Oh my gosh, there's just so much there. And as you're talking, like I want to just rewind just a bit when you were talking about recognizing that your role was not to save everybody else. I literally felt my breath catch when you said that because I mean that is something that I've lived myself, that same awareness. And you talked about, you're talking about the insecure attachment or that all of that kind of breeds that codependent dynamic, which the goal is to become more interdependent, where that codependent dynamic is so out of balance, where you've got that rescuer, the saver. That was me for sure. And then you've got the rescuee, and that's not a negative term toward Luke or the people on the other side of that, because I know I would rescue people that didn't even need rescuing. I'm like, I'm there for it. I'm here to support you. That's my whole identity. And then I know we naturally pair up with people who are kind of happy to outsource sometimes, like the example you gave about this is the last time I'm going to share with you. I know a lot of the people in my life who struggle with some of their own cognitive functioning, executive functioning, will happily outsource things to me if I'll take it. And so I did because that was my identity. It's like, yes, but then there's the massive burnout that comes from that. And so but going back to what you said about it's not for me to save everybody, that was such a scary, hard shift for me. And that was kind of me looking in the mirror too in my own relationships, and not even at that point my marriage was over, and that whole dynamic was so there in the marriage. But I saw it in my other relationships too, with my children, even like you were talking about a situation with a kiddo. We've been through a lot of trauma in my family, my household with my children. And oh my gosh, being able to step out into that place of you've got to be responsible for you. I can't save you. And I know there's so many people who are listening to this who are going to resonate with that, and their own hearts are pounding right now just listening to this. I know that. And you can feel, I can see, Lauren, you're connecting with your core there. So huge. Luke, from your perspective, what was that like seeing Lauren shift to not taking on as much?
At times it was scary. Understanding RSD has been so helpful because there were so many times where she said, like, I'm not doing this. I'm not telling you this again. And it felt like you're broken. There's something wrong with you, and I'm done trying to help you. And so it felt like she was giving up on me. And I had to do some internal work. A huge thing that she said that was so helpful is she would tell me, there's a difference between being hurtful and you being hurt.
Mhm.
And for so long, I'm like, I didn't understand because I'm like, no, this just hurts. Like, it hurts. What you're telling me hurts. And, but realizing, but doing my own internal work and realizing what she's saying is true. And it doesn't mean I'm a bad person. That when I don't pursue her, it triggers her attachment. And when I leave her there, that's hurtful. What I heard is, I'm a failure as a husband and I keep on hurting you. And I'm like, but I don't know what else to do. I don't know how to pursue you. I don't know. And I just had to, when she would share that with me, I had to be like, okay, that's true. I don't maybe understand it. Maybe I don't totally agree with it, but she's telling me this. And so I need to wrap my brain around it and believe it. And what can I do differently so that she's not left me of, I might not feel like I'm avoiding something, but if it goes to my head, if there's a thought in my head of like, we feel disconnected, or she might feel like we're disconnected, I need to pursue her
Mhm.
because her attachment is triggered and I have to, and I want to love her this way. It was scary in another sense. If I felt very overwhelmed when she was like, I need you to do this, or I'm done reminding you to do this. There's parts of me that was like, but I don't know how to remember this. So I had to get new resources, new tools. I had to use notes, calendars. And I had to, when she asked me to do something, rather than say, I'll do it in 10 minutes, I had to get up and do it right then because I knew I would forget in 10 minutes. And
Mhm.
I had to stop lying to myself that I would remember. I was like, no, I have to accept I will not remember. And it'll be better for me to do it now and for it to be done with than for her to be frustrated with me or me feel like a failure or for her to have to remind me. Because I was like, because I don't want her to have to, I don't want her, she does enough. And I was able to see like she does enough. I don't want to put another thing on her plate. Like, I don't want to be just another child she has to take care of. And that doesn't mean that I don't struggle with things, but it's up to me to figure out how to support myself and resource myself and not for her to be responsible for that. There's times where she's like, and there's been times where she would ask me to go like pick up the kids or something and I'm at work and I would have a voice in my head like, doesn't she realize that I'm in the middle of something? And I had to remind myself like, but she's also in the middle of something. And I had to remind those parts like she does this, this, and this. She wouldn't ask me if she didn't need me. And I have to trust her. But there was like demand avoidance coming in, transitioning out of things. It was like there's parts of me that just were like, why would she do this to me? This is wrong. This is unfair. It's like, no, it's not. I want to be her partner. If she needs my help, she wouldn't ask for my help if she didn't really need it, or if she didn't. And with her chronic illness, that also has also trained me in a sense of like she pushes herself way past most people. Like when she had a headache and she's like, "Can you pick up the kids?" It wasn't like, "Oh, I have a little headache." It's like, "I've had a headache for probably 3 days. I'm finally telling you that I have a headache." Like, and so I just throughout our marriage, I also started just not questioning those things. That doesn't mean my RSD or demand avoidance wouldn't kick in, but I had to do a lot of internal self-regulation because it would be maybe a Saturday afternoon and I've been tired for a week and I'm like relaxing and she's like, "Hey, you need to go do this for me." And my body's like, "No, like I'm overwhelmed. I had a plan of relaxing and I just had to tell myself like, okay. Like now I'm just like, okay, that's my demand avoidance. That's okay. And now I'm gonna go choose to do what she asked me because we are a partner. We're a team. Like I need to ask her to do some things and she needs to ask me to do some things.
And he's really great about when I see the demand avoidance come across his face by maybe a slight eye roll or a huff or puff.
Never.
And I just name it. And I say, like, that's what I'm seeing. Like, is that how you really feel? Because of course I don't want to feel like a burden or like he doesn't want to help. And he's like, sorry, I do have something coming up that wants to resist this demand. But I also know it's a completely legitimate request and I'm glad to do it. And like, that's all.
Yep.
We should move forward. It's so helpful. These words, these terms, this paradigm, it literally is life-saving when you can understand yourself and your partner better.
Yeah. And even if I'm not glad to do it, I'm willing to do it.
Willing,
Right.
yeah.
I mean, I'd be glad, but I'm willing to do it. And that, Luke, what you just described, that piece of self-awareness, well, for both of you, really, because, Lauren, you go in the 3 days without sharing you've got the headache. totally relatable. The overfunctioners of the world, the rescuers of the world, we just don't. We don't share what we're experiencing, and we just take on way too much, which we're basically training other people how to respond to us and expect way more from us than we're even really capable of. And then we start burning out. We get resentful. We start getting critical. Why can't you this? Why can't you that? Why don't you just? And then we become really judgy and shaming because, look I'm meeting all these needs for you. I'm anticipating your needs before you even have them. And why aren't you doing that for me? And then you've got Luke. Then on your side of things, you're struggling. That demand avoidance is your brain's like resource coordinator. Do I have the resources to do this? No, I don't. So I'm not. Why would she even ask me to do this? And
Yeah.
yet, I love what you said about recognizing, okay, I don't really have the resources to do this, but I'm also hearing that doesn't mean she does either. And sometimes as a team, we're going to take hits, as a team and as individuals, there are going to be moments when I don't have the resources, I don't have the bandwidth, but neither does she. And somebody's just going to have to dig in and deal with something. That self-awareness piece is so critical. And Luke, you even touched on the cognitive empathy, the theory of mind. I'm at work. Does she know I'm in the middle of something? Why would she even ask me to do this? Why would she ask me to go pick up the kids? But then you realizing, checking in and saying, okay, would my wife just be selfish like that? And then well, no, she wouldn't. If she's asking me to do something, she really needs me to do it. That is such an important place to get to for couples. Oh, we could talk about this all day long, but I want to be cognizant of your time. And I want to ask you, because, Luke, you are the trained therapist, and Lauren, you've been through, you're so trained and educated and also in trauma and the way our body. What do you guys have to say? Let's shift this toward a little bit more of the downside of things. What might you have to say to people who are listening or watching this, and they're saying, you know what, I don't see these ingredients in my marriage, or I'm putting in all this effort, but my partner is just absolutely not willing or able to have that insight. I know that's not a clear cut, what do you do? There's no answer to that, but any thoughts or guidance that you have for folks?
A couple things come up for me when somebody writes me, it kind of gives that scenario. I'll do a discovery call with them, and there's been several times where whatever, it's usually the wife, to be honest, but whatever the partner that says, I'm doing all this work and just doesn't seem to be reciprocating, I'll offer individual counseling or individual counseling separately to see if I can help that partner understand what's going on, the other perspective, see if they can engage in those, get some resources so they can start engaging differently. I don't encourage marriage counseling in that situation where there's not that reciprocation or doesn't seem like they want to put the mutual effort in. There's definitely situations where it's might be best for a separation or try to separate, even talk about divorce. Sometimes it just isn't meant to be. And depending on the situation, you talk about this, and I something I share is there's not everybody agrees with maybe this perspective, but this is kind of what I've noticed is there's neurodivergent people who have abusive patterns, and then there's, and actually Gottman calls it characterological abuse and circumstantial abuse. So there's times and circumstances you can be abusive. I was abusive. I was dysregulated. I was upset. I was defensive, gaslit. Part of that is also understanding is our communication styles. I'm a very concrete thinker. So when I said something, I thought I meant this, but it was not communicating that. And so there might be some work that needs to be explored, that types of things. And then there's also characterological abuse where it's they're neurodivergent. There's also a desire for power and control. And that is not a situation where we want that can necessarily be worked with or we even want to work with, because that's not safe. It's just going to be used to manipulate. So those are the kinds of things that come to my mind if there's been effort and there's just realized there's not the desire for insight. There's not the desire to listen, to reflect, to take responsibility. If they're willing to do counseling, great. Have them do it individual and see if they can access some of those resources. But until you see that I don't recommend or even offer couples counseling because it's those same dynamics end up happening as one overfunctions in the session and then continues overfunctioning and takes more effort and intentionality, and it just cyclical and is really draining and traumatizing. I don't know if that answers your question, but that's
Yeah,
what came to my mind when you
it
asked it.
100% did. And, I just second everything that you said. And I like the way you broke it down with the circumstantial and characterological, which is the John and Julie Gottman terminology and their categorization. And I think that, I talked in my last season of this podcast with Mona Kay, we talked about the timeline of our own marriages and how they evolved and devolved. And we both talk about how we became toxic. I became a toxic person. Characterologically, I'm not a toxic human being, but the circumstantial situation resulted in very toxic behaviors of my own, like you're talking about. I really want our listeners to think about what Luke's saying. And if you've listened to me much, you've heard me talk about it too. I call it capacity, willingness, and motivation. Those three pieces really have to be there for each individual. And I know a lot of people come to me who have realized that a partner is neurodivergent, or maybe usually it's, well, sometimes it's they realize themselves that they themselves are neurodivergent. And it feels like, oh, this is the answer. This is the answer. Now we can move forward as a couple. But when only one partner is on board with the insight, the self-awareness, the reflection, the other one is, and sometimes they can come around to it, because sometimes at first it's like that label is like, hey, hold on, you're calling me broken or whatever. And like you said, that individual work is really critical to help that individual to see if they're even capable or interested. In some cases, that other partner doesn't even want to be involved in coaching or counseling. And I think it's important for people to know and to hear that sometimes there's such misalignment, the attunement's not there. Those ingredients are just not there. And one person in a relationship can't make it work by themselves. That's just, a relationship is two people. It's two-way. So yeah, Lauren, do you want to add anything to all of that?
I just thought when you guys were talking about an analogy that maybe Luke could share quickly about the coasters, but just wanted to say, like, I think it's always important to say when you start to change, there can be this idea of therapeutic backlash where you're actually changing and becoming more healthy, and then your partner, the homeostasis is off in your partnership, and there can be negative real negative consequences to that if there's not a willingness and a readiness in them. And so just a reminder of, like, if you aren't sure if you're safe, that's always the main priority, is your physical safety. I stopped over functioning for Luke, and because of the person he is and the resources he did already have, he was able to be with himself in the midst of that feeling and difficulty. Some of his clients report to him that it really feels like abandonment when their partners stop over, pull away from the enmeshment, actually individuate, stop and feel totally left alone. And that triggers all kinds of stuff in them, right? And it could trigger anger and violence. It could trigger really serious stuff. So I think it's important to know, if you do start to renegotiate what you're doing within the context of that relationship and your partner's not on board, you need some support as you do that, as you navigate that. Because that's a journey. Even if you're headed towards separation, that's still going to require mindfulness about how you're going about doing that, so that you can stay safe and that your house doesn't become a war zone.
Yes, very. I don't even have anything to add to what you said there. That's
Absolutely
very well put. Luke, tell us the coaster analogy.
Yeah, do you remember his name, Lauren? Because you have better
Dr.
names.
Jake Porter.
Okay, so he uses the analogy. He uses it in betrayal trauma, but I think it works with any relational dynamics. Basically, he uses like a cup coaster. So there's a coaster, and the coaster represents being all into the relationship. There's trust, there's safety, there's communication, there's reciprocity, and that's where we want to be. But a lot of times in a relationship, there's usually one person on the coaster and the other one is off the coaster, and that person's trying to pull them onto the coaster. But what we're talking about is there's might be a time where that person on the coaster needs to step off that coaster and heal and do their own work. And this other person needs to do their work and they need to work and get on the coaster. The one that's been off the coaster needs to work and get on the coaster. And there's going to be a time where this other overfunctioner partner is going to stay off the coaster for a little bit and see if they are like legitimate, if they're consistent, if they really want to be there. And a lot of times in this situation, the underfunctional gets on the coaster and says, I'm on the coaster. Why aren't you meeting me halfway? Or why aren't you on the coaster? And they get really upset. And so they get back off the coaster. But the idea is they need to stay on that coaster to build trust, allow that person to heal. And when they're ready and feel safe, then they get then they get on the coaster. And so just that idea that came up with who it was, or Dr. Andrew Bauman, he used the idea of like a car accident. Like, what if the underfunctioner drive the car and they cause abuse, trauma, hurt? They're like, the other person's not going to want to get in their car right away. And they're like, I'm driving fine. I'm okay. Just get in the car. Like, no, I don't trust you. And there has to be that space that the person doesn't get back on the coaster or back in the car until they feel safe to do that. And the underfunctioner or the abusive partner needs to do their own work in the midst of that season where there's not safety, and just give them that space so that when they're ready, they feel safe, they can re-engage.
And that is actually a real scenario. That last one you just gave about the car, that's not just an analogy. That's a real scenario that happens so often with neurodiverse couples, where you've got someone who is driving in a way that feels very unsafe to the other partner. I mean, that's not even just that is such a, I'm glad you said that, because that just segued right into very real safety issues that are happening with neurodiverse couples, and how each person has, the overfunctioner has the responsibility to stay out of the car and honor their own fear, honor their own gut telling them I don't feel safe, instead of getting in the car to protect the feelings of the driver. And then the driver has their work to do to say, I'm driving in a way that feels fine to me, but my partner, my kids even, are feeling terrified while they're in the car with me. And so we take that literal situation and apply it figuratively to other aspects in the relationship. And that's a great analogy. So I think that's a great place to kind of wind down here. And is there anything else that the two of you, either one of you, just any final parting words that you want to share with our listeners and viewers?
I just think as the neurotypical partner, for me, it's been actually really empowering to realize that acceptance goes a really long way. And it's not like some fluffy word. It is a gritty, like life-changing thing to accept the realities around you or in the people that you love, and stop trying to change them. Mm-hmm. Now, we say that in light of knowing some things do need shifting, some things do need changing. And then also it's figuring out what things are just preferences in me. What things can I actually let go of that aren't actual relational needs that I release my partner from, and then actually feel more love towards them and less bitterness, because I'm not expecting this thing that's just not in their makeup. It's just not who they are. They love me in other ways. And Luke and I both do that with each other. We're both, love each other really well in some ways, and in other ways, like, we're never going to find this perfect love in one person and in one relationship. So I just encourage both neurodivergent and neurotypical partners listening to this, if you are in a relationship where there's reciprocity, willingness, I like those three that you said, Jodi: willingness, motivation, and
capacity.
If those elements are there to varying degrees, then it's like, okay, how can I soften into what is? We really talk a lot about learning to live in reality, and this is really important for survivors and for people who have come from abusive situations, and also for people in neurodiverse relationships. Learning to live in reality. How do I soften into this and accept it? And that's not a one-day thing. That's not a 1 week. It's more cyclical. There's grief, acceptance, and grief and acceptance. And one day you kind of wake up and it's just softer. It's not so edgy and so prickly and so awful and difficult. And you can finally like feel freed up to enjoy the goodness and beauty in life because you're not always consumed with the trying to change this thing. That's been my experience.
Yeah, and I would just add, or on to what you're saying, that acceptance is not the same thing as accommodation. Those are two different things. A lot of people are like, they hear acceptance and they're hearing, well, I've just got to accommodate. No, because there are still those things that need to be changed. And safety is at the root of what you really have to look at needs to be changed. And then you look at those needs versus wishes and preferences. We're taping this right before Valentine's Day, so it's going to air after Valentine's Day. But I just did a webinar on YouTube, and I talk about that very thing about I stay away from the word needs when I'm working with couples because so many needs are not really needs. It's really more, this is what I want. This is what I prefer. This is what I wish. This is what Hollywood's told me a relationship's supposed to be. And so,
Yes.
Kind of going back to safety, acceptance, doing our own part, all of that. Luke, any final words of wisdom here?
Yeah. As Lauren was just talking, that acceptance is key because as I've been able to accept my neurotype and capacity, I freed myself from unrealistic expectations, but also Lauren has freed me from unrealistic expectations, and there's just been so much more like freedom to love each other. And I also want to say, just because my capacity may be low, doesn't mean that there are times where I'm like, I push myself. So like, I still want to make sure that Lauren feels loved. And so if there's things that I'm doing or not doing that is communicating her being unloved, I still want to find ways to push myself or like resource myself so that she can feel loved. Being neurodivergent is an excuse that Lauren doesn't get loved the way that she needs to be loved. And within a safe, reciprocating relationship, as I do that, she also recognizes, oh, you need extra space. You need some downtime. And she gives that to me. So like having that, just accepting that and verbalizing it and having that open communication and dialogue is just so important so that I can learn how to love her well, even when I feel incapable or like capacity wise, but she also doesn't expect perfection. But she can still share with me. Like we had a conversation last week where there was a miss and she shared with me like I didn't feel loved. But she's also like, I know these are part of this is me, but I also want you to know this. And it was really helpful because she did it in a way that wasn't saying you're a bad person, but there's still, can you love me? I still need to be loved in these areas. And because of the language and understanding my RSD, my neurodivergence, she was able to communicate in a way that wasn't shameful and harmful, but was still able to get her needs met. And I was able to receive it and like, okay, because I missed this, or I'm not a bad person, but I need to find ways to be more intentional.
Mm. Yeah, I would just kind of summarize what you're saying is that when we choose to be in a relationship or in a marriage, we're choosing the well-being of our partner as much as our own. And in other words, we can't just choose a relationship because of how it benefits us. We have to also look at, if I'm choosing to be in this relationship, I'm also choosing your well-being as well. And I have some accountability there to make sure your well-being it matters, even if that means sometimes I have to make a sacrifice here and there. I think a lot of people end up in relationships and they're really, and I would say this happens on both sides sometimes, that they're really looking at how's this relationship benefiting me and making my, how am I getting my needs met, and less sometimes at making sure our partner's benefiting and their well-being is safe. And just to that's what kind of comes to my mind when I'm hearing you talk there, Luke.
Well said.
Thank you. Well said to both of you too. This has been so great. I want to just reiterate to the folks listening that Luke and Lauren are also admins of the Facebook group that I've had for 4 or 5 years now. Just find us, search Neurodiverse Relationships. You'll find the group, and it's a great group of all neurotypes, all genders, and we have safe conversations in there, which we don't allow venting and bashing, and our members are able to talk amongst each other and get feedback and guidance. And there's a lot of really heavy conversations in there, but there's also a lot of just educational and lightheartedness, and it's a great place. So come on over and find us there. Thank you both so much for being on this podcast, and I'm going to be on yours here soon too, and I'm looking forward to that.
Yes.
So yeah, well, thank you both, and I'll be seeing you around, and we'll definitely put in the show notes how you can find Luke and Lauren, so you can go check out their website and their services as well. So thanks, guys, and I hope you have a great evening. It's time for you to go to bed. I'm just starting my day here.
It's that time.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jodi.
Thanks so much. That's a wrap for today's episode. Be sure to subscribe or follow the podcast so you won't miss any of these amazing interviews. And as always, if you're benefiting and enjoying this podcast, please give us a review. It really helps other people know that this podcast is really beneficial and worth listening to. Thanks for watching on YouTube or tuning in to your favorite podcast platform. And don't forget to visit me online at jodicarlton.com for more resources. I have assessment quizzes, educational articles, courses, and more. And if you have any questions, just reach out to my team at gethelp@jodicarlton.com. Until next time.